the CEO. As I mentioned, I was the CEO, or I am the CEO of Shako. Shako is a multi-platform mobile app development company based out of Richmond, Virginia. We actually have offices in Richmond, in Colima, Mexico, in Barcelona, Spain, Miami, and Quito, Ecuador. Today, the purpose of this conversation is how to build an experience across multiple platforms that is connected. As new technology continues to be released and gets more mature, users want to be able to experience brands across multiple touch points. The second thing I'll say before I start is we really have three jobs with the technology that we build. The first one's relevance. We want to make sure that we create software and experiences that are relevant, that attract our users at the right time for the right moment and create the right experience. The second one is innovation. If you're like me or anybody on my team, you are constantly pursuing innovation. What's the next coolest thing and how do I integrate it into the tech that I'm building? And then the third one, and the point of today's conversation is really connections, right? So connections happen two ways, from platform to platform or technology to technology, and from technology to user. So we want to make sure that technology that you're building is relevant, innovative, and can connect the user to your brand. The reality is, if you think back about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, this is what we used to see, right? If you think, again, 2015, not too long ago, people used to open up phones and have to pinch and zoom to actually see the Wall Street Journal. And today, we're getting ready to basically build across multiple platforms, and it can be harder, a lot harder than most people expect. We've had a strong grasp of mobile and web frameworks, but even though we do understand how to build iOS apps, we understand how to build web apps, we understand how to build websites, we face a lot of challenges. We've done websites well, we've done mobile well, but if you're like me, you still run into this. And again, if you're like me, your mom likes holding this device here in the middle, this tablet, and that's what she takes pictures with. That's what she reads the news with. And more often than not, this is what I see when I look at apps. They're built for mobile and they're built for PCs. So it's very, very hard to move into a new phase of life, which is this building for multiple platforms, when the reality is, like, we don't even build properly for the different form factors, PC or laptop or web, tablets, and then mobile. As I mentioned, we're just starting to build experiences correctly for various form factors. And now we need to account for multiple platforms. And a lot of our team is really starting to build for that, right? How do you incorporate the watch? How do you incorporate glasses? How do you incorporate voice? And how do you build for those? We've been so accustomed to building iOS, Android, and web. And today, I really wanted to share a couple strategies with you on how to start really accounting for multiple platforms. The reality is all platforms are not created equal, meaning we don't build the same thing for every single platform. And the second thing I wanted to drill into people's head is multi-platform is not cross-platform. Cross-platform is when you use one tool set, one code base, and deploy across multiple platforms. Multi-platform is the ability to create unique experiences for different touch points or along your brand experience. So a platform example is your Google Home. Another platform example is your iOS device. Another one is possibly your Mac or your PC. So multi-platform is not cross-platform. You can use cross-platform solutions to deploy across multiple platforms, but there is a difference. And the reality is, almost every organization nowadays is building some sort of platform. Platform seems to be one of the biggest buzzwords that we come across with most of our clients. We're even building some platforms ourselves. It's not an oil platform, but the word is still very confusing. So what do I want you to take away over the next 15 or 20 minutes? Hopefully I spark some interest in you to basically go back to work tomorrow or later today and start thinking about what the platforms you are working on. Before we do that, I want to make sure that we align around some definitions. Prepare for some new expectations. We have clients coming in daily that are asking us to help them create platforms. If you don't have clients and you work inside the business, then how do you work within the platform, or how do you collaborate with the different team members? Finally, I'll leave you with 9 strategies that I hope you can take with you, and I'll be here for questions. Bill Lumbergh probably didn't say this, but if this movie was filmed in 2020, I'm sure he would have said something like this. I want to ensure that our users have a connected experience across our platform. I've heard that from so many different clients. And I'm sure if you have seen Office Space, this is exactly what you're picturing as you're sitting in your desk trying to figure out how to push that new feature out for iOS, or how to push that new feature out for Android. The reality is we have to come to alignment around platforms. I was talking to one of my business partners a few days ago, and we were talking about platforms, and we came up with a list of 9 types of platforms. So when we are connecting experiences across platforms, we have to understand what platforms those are the ones that we are working with. So there's technology platforms, right? AWS, Azure. There's computing platforms. These are platforms that help you run software, such as your iPhone. There's interaction networks, which are also platforms. That's a Facebook. That is a Shopify. There's marketplaces. There's marketplaces such as Shopify or Amazon. There's content crowdsourcing platforms. These are the Udacities of the world. These are the Udemys of the world, where you're basically crowdsourcing new content. There's data harvesting platforms, which are extremely popular to basically gather data lakes. Think of data lakes. And then there's content distribution platforms, right? CMSs, augmented CMSs. And the reality is we have to understand what platforms we are working with. For the purpose of the conversation today, I'm limiting it to technology and computing platforms and how we connect the experiences across a laptop, a phone, a headset or a wearable device, and or a voice device. These seem to be the most common computing platforms that we are working with, in addition to the technology platforms such as AWS or Azure. But the most important thing you can do is make sure that you align around what a platform means in your organization. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they are now the platform lead for their organization. And the reality is you have to understand what platform you are leading, or what engineering team you need to build that platform. But if you don't get this right from the beginning, there will be a lot of confusing conversations as your organization grows. At Shaco, we're well known for connecting the experience across multiple platforms or form factors or touch points. Three different names for essentially the same thing, right? So we do watch experiences or wearable experiences. We do headsets, we do AR, VR, we do mobile, we do voice, and we also do web. And I love working in all these different environments because they're very, very different. And the experience that you can draw out is incredible. I don't think that somebody should have a similar experience on a website as they do with their watch. The watch is a quick reminder of an action that needs to be taken, where the website is very, very powerful, or a web browser or a web platform very powerful at providing a lot of content. From a voice perspective, again, it serves as a useful reminder of a voice prompt or an input. So over the next 2 or 3 slides, what I wanted to give you is a few examples of the things that we have worked on and how we have approached this multi-platform experience differently. I was talking to my wife the other day, and this is something that we worked on, right? So you come home and you're like, hey, listen, I would love to buy a new couch. The first thing you naturally do is either ask a friend, obviously, or search the web. So that's the first platform. In today's world, if you've used IKEA or if you've used Amazon, they let you essentially understand the scale of that couch in your living room, in your bedroom, or wherever it is that you're putting it. So you search, and then you understand the scale. From there, if the couch makes sense, there's really one of 2 things you could do, right? You could either buy it directly online, or you could navigate to the store to actually pick it up or purchase it. Once you purchase that couch, you have a smartphone and you're getting notifications. Finally, once you get that notification, you could use something like Google Home or Alexa to remind you to be home when that couch is being delivered. So I talked about relevance and connection at the beginning of this presentation. And the reality is you want to be relevant in front of your users across multiple platforms or multiple digital touchpoints. And it doesn't make sense to build or have feature parity across any of these devices. Too many people, too many of our clients are essentially still continuing with this feature parity approach where they're essentially stuffing in features into all these. Here's something funny. I haven't experienced this, but I've heard of people trying to do this with the watch and Apple's launch of essentially new features and I guess a larger screen with the watch. People are trying to put more things into the watch. And the reality is we can put more information into the watch, but it's meant for a specific purpose. It's a quick glance, it's a quick notification. And so when I'm talking about connected experiences, I'm making sure that the user can flow from one experience to the next without being interrupted, and your brand still staying relevant in the mind of the user. Here's another example. We actually just came back from a client that is looking to do something like this, right? And we're working with them. Again, as you could see here, we're using the same form factors, the same devices, the same platforms in multiple occasions, but they serve different purposes. So the first one is search and book. Most people are not going to download an app before they start engaging with a brand. So you use that web platform to essentially search and book an experience or the boarding of a pet in this case. The second thing you do is send them a text message. So you use a notification platform to remind them that that experience or that boarding has been booked, at which point you could ask them to download an application. That application should be aware, there should be some context, right? Thank you, Alex, for basically booking this. You're not starting from scratch because you already know where they came from. They came from the web. From there, we move into the watch, right? Gentle reminders, and this could be in the watch, this could be on the phone, just a little reminder to keep connecting with them. Hey, listen, your dog Midnight is going to be boarded tomorrow. Just a reminder to bring his food and his toys. Finally, your pet is boarded and you want to engage with them. You pull out your watch, you basically have voice on your watch and you say, hey, listen, how is my pet doing? Without necessarily having to type a text message. So again, very, very different touch points. And I think as developers, as a development community, it's on us to start thinking about not feature parity, but experiences that we want to create on these different devices. I have a 4 or 5-year-old daughter. Well, she's about to be 5. And this is the most common experience and probably one of the driving factors to why Shako is doing this. I pick her up from school and sometimes she's a little fussy. So I essentially grab my phone and I give her what's called PJ Masks. For those of you that have kids, you've probably seen this show, but we get home and as I'm starting to just basically do things, I open up my computer screen so she's not using my phone. And the program that I use, in this case, Netflix, allows her to pick up from where she left off on the show. The final thing we do is once we're basically unloaded, the car's unloaded, everything's out of the car, et cetera, she wants to finish that show and she turns on Netflix on the television. The reality is this is an amazing example of how Netflix has allowed a user to go from phone to desktop to television with a seamless experience. Nobody is basically starting from scratch. What was that show? What second in the show was I in? Do I have to rewatch it? And so my ask, my requirement, my suggestion for everybody in the development community, product managers, developers, iOS, Android, web, start thinking about how to create this continuous experience for the users, because the more platforms your brand or your platform is relevant in, the easier it is for you to stay relevant in the eyes of those users and consumers. Why is this so important? We've been running a mobile development firm for a little over 10 years now, and feature parity is hard to maintain. If you have iOS, Android, and web teams, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes iOS is ahead of Android, sometimes Android's ahead of iOS. The reality is if we add 3, 4, or 5 more platforms to the mix, it's not just going to be hard, it's going to be impossible. The second thing is silo mentality, right? I'm part of the iOS team, or I'm part of this specific feature of the app. And if those groups are not communicating or connecting, it's extremely hard to make sure that that continuous or connected experience exists. Quality is highly variable. I know that sometimes you have great iOS developers and not so great Android developers, or incredible Android developers and not so great web developers. So the testers aren't doing as good of a job as they should. So quality can be very, very variable because you're trying to maintain this feature parity. The fourth one is platform implementations. So if we start thinking about platforms, you have somebody from the executive senior management team, they come down and say, hey, listen, we need a consumer good platform. And so if you don't think about all the different connection points when you are doing this implementation, it's going to be very hard to add them later on. Finally, with everything that I've mentioned, team communication is hard. I'm going to give you one suggestion that I think will simplify it, or at least it simplifies it in Shaco's teams, but I'll share that in a few seconds. Keep in mind, a lot of companies still don't have every single one of these touch points. And the reality is all the touch points don't need to exist. But this list here is something that we are already experiencing with mobile and web. So as we start adding voice, or as voice becomes more mature, or as we start adding different types of wearables, I think this list is going to be more important to keep in the back of our minds. So how do we do this? How do we fix this problem? How do we get ahead of the problem? I think there's really three core strategies. There's technical strategies that I want to share with you that we've had or implemented at Shaco. There's team strategies, and there is product design strategies. The first one is technology strategy. First, feature parity is sometimes right. This is probably the most important thing that you could take away today. Feature parity is no longer something that we should all be worried about. Feature parity works when you're thinking about iOS and Android. Feature parity does not work when you're thinking about voice, when you're thinking about wearables, when you're thinking about headsets. It just doesn't work that way anymore. The second thing is use similar code libraries or even architecture patterns. I think a lot of times when we work with our clients, there's a voice team on this side of the building, and there's an emerging tech team on this side of the building, and then there's an iOS and Android team and a web team. They don't talk, and as a result of that, the libraries they basically choose or the architecture patterns that they decide to focus on are very, very different. So when it comes to a time to integrate the teams, it becomes very hard. Code generation. So for us, it's all about CI/CD, right? So you have to ensure that the code generation behaviors and mechanisms that you are using are the same across all the different technologies, all the different touch points that you are going to be integrating for that specific solution. And then finally, when you're talking about testers, your testing team, the QA team, has to be testing the features that are being developed for each specific touch point or platform. Number two, design and experience strategy. Define your user moments. I know if I had to guess, 95% of the people on this call today or this Zoom meeting are probably developers, but it's on us to understand the moments, the engagement points that our design teams, our product design and experience teams are giving us. We have to understand whether it makes sense. We are the guys that are developing these platforms. We're developing these solutions. And so when you work with your design and experience strategy teams, make sure you understand those user moments across the different platforms. Create a common design language. So push back on this. It makes it a lot easier if we have a common design language. And I think the one thing I'll stress here is a common design language is hard to create for mobile and web. But now when you start using voice, design language still appears. When you start using augmented reality and glasses, it still appears. And then finally, align around a common user interaction. So make sure you understand the user moments, make sure you have a common design language, and align around interaction points. Number three is probably the most important thing that anybody can do as we start releasing different touch points across that user experience chain. The reason being is we basically designed design languages around making sure that people could come into our solutions, come into our app, come into our website, and quickly understand how to navigate that solution. When we start designing around common user interactions, the user is now going to understand how to do it in augmented reality, how to do it in voice, and how to do it with a wearable. So common user interactions is just as important as a common design language as we start building out our platforms. Last but not least is scalable teams. So scalable teams for me is one of the most important things that we can do as developers. The first one is feature-driven culture. So keep in mind, this is different. This is very, very different than feature parity, right? What are the features that we are responsible for with the individual platform that we are focused on? What are the features that we as developers are responsible for within that specific touch point, within the voice touch point, within the mobile touch point? The second thing is something that we have found after years of testing. Make sure your teams are small and nimble. So teams of 4 to 5 people seem to be incredible. I actually just learned this today, but the Navy SEALs actually did this. They keep their teams small, 3 to 5 people. Google does this. They keep their teams small, 3 to 5 people. It makes sure that that communication is constantly happening. And as you drive for this feature-driven culture, your teams can quickly communicate around what they are developing. Done is not done in terms I've completed my sprint anymore. Done means that your multi-platform sprint is complete. So voice is done, iOS is done, Android is done, and web is done. So as you are basically pushing out all these different features for the platforms, done should be across the board. The big reason for this is maturity. For those of you that were developing apps in 2014, 2015, 2016, we lost a lot of users if you didn't have a great experience on mobile. So if your mobile app had a poor experience, you'd lose the user. That maturity is now coming to voice. That maturity is coming to wearables. People expect more from our teams. And that's why done is less features, but it should be done across the touch points or the channels that you expect to engage in. The final thing, and again, this is probably the most important thing, second to, I guess, the second most important thing around building scalable teams. So the first one is 4 to 5 people. The second one is demo as a team. I can't stress how important it is in this multi-platform environment to demo as a team. Bring the people that are working on voice into the room and ask them to demo what they are doing. Bring the people that are working on the apps and ask them to do what they are doing. And bring the people that are doing web and ask them what they are doing. Try to string that experience that you're looking for. It's going to make the development experience better because you could see where the gaps are. It's going to make our teams stronger as a whole, and it's going to allow us to push out better products. I didn't have much time today, but I think that gives you a quick little introduction into what we're doing, what we are seeing with respect to multi-platform. I wanted to give you guys about 5-10 minutes for questions. As I mentioned, we've been around for a little over 10 years. We have shy of 75 employees. We've been working with over 100 clients, and we keep on pushing this multi-platform experience. Today, as you can see here, we work with companies like Dominion Energy or innovative small companies that are using augmented reality to essentially bring record labels to life. Happy to take any questions. As I mentioned, I'm the CEO at Shaco. We're a company based out of Richmond, Virginia. Feel free to email me or send me a quick message on Twitter. Like I said, I think we have about 10 minutes left, opening it up to questions. And Tracy, I don't know if you could help me with any questions.
Yes, so 2 things. So if people would rather just ask their questions, everybody can unmute and we can do that. And then I also posted the Slack channel for this talk. You can ask questions there or in the chat. So feel free to ask anywhere.
Hey, Alex. Thanks for your presentation. It's great. So, so you mentioned the team size is around 4 to 5 developers, right? So that is cross multi-platform. And how do you close this kind of skills gap among these developers? and help you to do this code review between each other, even like between the web developer and the mobile developers?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I think there's two things, right? So you have to figure out what works best for you. I'll give you a couple examples. So one of our clients, we are one of, I think, 6 or 7 teams that are working on the application. In this case, we have 2 iOS developers, 2 Android developers, and a technical lead that can review pull requests for both the iOS and the Android platform. So that's our team. The second team that we have is really a team of testers. And I'm sorry, the second team is a web team. So the web team is working with the same client in a very small team, 2 to 3 people, that are essentially focused on bringing some of the web features that have been sorely missed over the last few years to life. So it's not about having an iOS, an Android, a web, and essentially 5 people that are doing distinct things on the technologies. It's about understanding where you want your teams to be. The whole concept behind 4 or 5 is not having a team of 30 or 40 people that are basically doing the same thing. It's a tight-knit team with one lead that is pushing towards a specific feature on a given week. Other people that I've heard call this the snowball effect. So what you're trying to do is basically tackle one feature at a time and push it forward. And those small teams that basically communicate significantly are what we have found to be one of the most successful ways to do that. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, that definitely. Thanks a lot. So literally, you kind of still separate the mobile team from the web development team, right? Because it's still quite 2 different skill sets. The web team is really need some Angular or React knowledge, but the mobile side is like really between iOS and Android.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. And again, it just really depends on what you're looking to do, right? So you might have your iOS, Android, so Kotlin, Swift. You might have your React Native development team. In some cases, the example of the pet example that I provided a few minutes ago, we have a React Native team. We have 2 React Native developers, 1 web developer, and an API developer. So we still have about 4 or 5 people with 1 lead that is basically driving the whole process. But we're working across essentially two computing platforms, right? Web and mobile. And then the basically interaction or the connection platform, which is like the API, right? So we have 1 person working on the APIs, 1 person working on React, and then our React Native specialist. So that team has 5 distinct platform specialists, but they're still a team of 5.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And if they work on the same feature, that means actually the both teams, they will work with the same product owner because the business intent will be the same, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so that's the case. And I think that's one of the things that we're starting to learn and we have not perfected is the role of the product owner. So if you work with product owners or product managers today, they're very siloed, right? Their focus is web or their focus is mobile. And then they talk and then they bring that to their teams. But if your focus is feature, like what is the feature that the user needs to engage across this specific channel? That's something very different. We haven't perfected that, but we have product managers working across web, mobile, and voice in some cases, so they understand how to connect the different experiences.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I actually had one question. I work in iOS, and we work very closely with our Android team, but most importantly, our web team is a little bit more siloed out. But what would you recommend to how do you balance between trying to have that partnership, but still not have it being overbearing?
I think the one thing that I would recommend is a quick meeting, right? So I would do a 1-week meeting or a daily huddle of 5 or 10 minutes, just really quick. What are you working on? Where are you stuck? And how can we help each other? And so it's not being overbearing. I know a lot of us are in meetings all day long, but if you have 1-week meeting of like 5 minutes and you have your iOS team and your web team, just to connect to see what are they stuck on? right? Like you guys might learn from each other, and it's a 5 or 10 minute meeting. I think in today's world, especially as a development team, we rely on our project managers, on our product owners, on our scrum masters to basically tell us what the other team is stuck on. But I think if we come together as teams, maybe it's like the iOS and the Android team, or the 3 teams for 5 minutes once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week, and just say, hey, listen, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm stuck on. There's going to be a lot of cross-pollination, and it's not a lot of time. And that information goes from development team to development team without having to go up, down, and like up, across, and down. So Tracy, I'm not sure if that helped you, but that's what we have found to be successful. It's again, I learned this earlier today, but 1 minute of meetings, especially in these like quick, what are you working on? What are you stuck in? 1 minute of meetings normally saves 10 minutes of work. So if you're meeting for 5 minutes, you're probably saving an hour's worth of work over a given sprint.
Cool, thank you for that. All right, so with that, unless anybody else has any last minute questions, I would like to thank Alex for coming in. I enjoyed the talk, very thought-provoking stuff that you presented today. And I think after this session, we will be closing out. So I look forward to seeing everyone there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.